Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Great, good evening. My name is Brian Hickey, and I'm the General Manager of the Electric Department here at City of Seward. To my right is Taylor Crocker, he's our Operations Manager, and further to our right is Mark Begich, he's the CEO of Northern Compass, and I'll give him a little bit of an introduction in a minute. I just wanted to kind of walk through why we're here tonight and a sort of a recap of what we've done so far. This is our third town hall meeting. The objective of our town hall meetings is to create an open and transparent process for the community to come together and decide what I would say the future of your electric utility. Back in September, we launched this effort. We brought in the CEOs and a board member, two CEOs and a board member. They were from Cordova Electric, Copper Valley Electric, and Kodiak Electric. Those are both small sort of seaboard electric cooperatives, and they talked about how their world looks as an electric cooperative in a small seaboard town. Just for kind of scale, Cordova Electric is about half the size from an electrical load perspective when compared to Seward, and Copper Valley Electric is about twice as big as Seward from an electrical load perspective, and Kodiak is about that same size. So we brought those three folks in, and they gave you some of the ideas of what they're doing with their cooperatives in their communities to make a difference. The next town hall we had in December, we brought in the speakers from the larger electrical cooperatives in the Rail Belt. We had Travis Million from Golden Valley Electric, Sarah Lamb from Homer Electric, we had Tony Izzo from Golden Valley Electric, and a couple of the folks from Begich were on. And with that, in that meeting, they sort of talked about their corporate values, and Trish Baker, her name was avoiding me, Trish Baker from Begich, but they sort of talked about their values and what their co-ops are all about and how they're actually working in their communities to do some, to better their communities and to deliver electricity safely, reliably, and efficiently. We also did a community survey, and I got some great feedback from some of the folks here tonight that some of the questions may not have been as precise as they could have been. But we are going to rerun that survey here in the spring, or later in the spring. But the survey, we had the survey, and we had two focus groups where we brought selected members of the survey group together to have a more in-depth discussion about what the feelings were around how the electric utility is today and what the potential future for it is. And we've taken all that data, and we're using that sort of to inform these discussions that we're having right now. Tonight we're here, we have former U.S. Senator Mark Begich. He's also was a former mayor of the city of Anchorage. And the reason we brought him down to talk to you all is he was the mayor of the city of Anchorage, and in that role he managed the electric department for the city of Anchorage, as well as the telephone utility. It was called Anchorage Telephone Utility at the time. And he'll talk a little bit about the journey that the city of Anchorage went on with the telephone utility, turning it into a municipal agency and eventually selling it, and some of the challenges and some of the benefits that he sees with the municipal ownership model. And I guess I should step back to the very beginning, and the premise that we're starting with here is the way the utility's been run for the last 30 or 40 years is probably not sustainable going into the future, and so a change needs to be made, and we really want to bring the community together and create have an open and transparent process where everybody gets to say in it, and hopefully we can bring the community to a place where they can come to a decision that at least the vast majority of folks are satisfied with. Community members are central to the process. There is no decision being made behind closed doors. There's no predetermined path. Really, the community needs to come together and form that path. It's a community conversation, and it's one that depends on input. And we really value the input we have at these meetings where we get to chat a little bit in the lobby. If there will be a question and answer session where you can come up and ask questions of the panel, myself, Taylor, or Mark, and Senator Begich, I guess you call you. Sorry, call you. Yeah. A lot of people call you Begich. What works for you?
They call me other things.
They call you other things. That's right. Yeah, we're not calling it. At any rate, so you'll be able to ask questions. And what we're working toward is a time, ideally late summer or early fall of this year, where the community can come together and make a decision about what it is they want to do with the utility. We are committed to providing clear information, open forums for discussion like tonight and like our focus groups, bringing perspectives of other utilities to the community. We're going to use this survey as an opportunity for feedback. We'll rerun the survey. We may adjust some of the questions based on some of the comments I've received about it. But we'll take that survey and we'll ideally we'll have a better sense of where the community is, and that will help inform the city administration and the city council as to where they would go from here. And we try to be consistent with our communication throughout this whole process. We have a website, and we post documents and any of the flyers that go out on the website, and we'll try to push more information out there as it becomes available. We want an open, transparent, community-based process. And with that, what I'm going to do real quick is have Taylor Crocker as my operations manager. Taylor does all the real work. I was sort of in the background, so Taylor's out there on the front line in the middle of the night when the snow's blowing, and trying, along with the awesome team that we have at the utility, the line workers and operations and the administrative staff are just wonderful. So anyway, Taylor's going to give you a little bit of update on where we're going. We've done a number of projects to better align the utility with the future. And then when he's done, I'll give you a little update on the Clean Ports project, which I sort of handle the regional stuff in the Clean Ports project, and he's handling his other stuff. So, Taylor?
Thanks, Brian. So a lot of people were following the council meetings last year. We were asking for lots of money for lots of different projects, and so that was the planning year. This year is our executing year, and just so far this month, we've placed our order for the AMI meters that will lead to greater transparency for your bills, allow us to track the different usage between different user groups better, and then that leads into our other software that we're going into a discovery phase on Monday with. It's called Professional Computer Services. So this will be like an enterprise software. It's a one-stop shop for our whole utility. Covers accounting, billing, our inventory control management, work order management, outage management system, so you can see where the outages are at and if the crew's responding. We have a meter data management system, and then our mapping system, which is going to make it much easier to design services and keep track of our infrastructure. So those two things kind of piggyback together, and we're hoping to be live with it early summer, which also leads to a member portal where you can log in on your phone, see your usage in real time, and pay your bill, look at outages, message us, the whole deal. So as far as the IT stuff goes, those are two projects that are in full gear right now that were authorized last year. Infrastructure-wise, we're working on 2 miles on Nash Road from Sawmill Creek to Seward. We're hoping to kick the construction off in March. So that'll definitely, impede the traffic a little bit on Nash Road, but then we'll be complete with our 115 insulation upgrade on our transmission line. We're also in the engineering phase at the Spring Creek substation. So we got another meeting on Tuesday with the engineers, and we're trying to get through that design so we can get it to construction. And then the Long substation is fully designed and is ready for construction, most likely starting in September. So, and then we got the shore power substation, our large project to electrify the cruise ships. The substation has been moved from the port up to Fort Raymond. So the corner of Sea Lion and Diamond is where the shore power substation will be, with the battery energy storage system, which is a 12 megawatt, 2-hour battery, which would be great for the community as well. And then we have lots of smaller projects. We had Alaska Remote Imaging. I'm sure many of you ran into their tech that's been running around and GPSing all of our locations for the poles and all of our equipment, but they're complete with that. It's on kind of the back-end processing, and we should have it live on February 17th, which that'll lead to better maintenance tracking, putting project management plan together for 5 years for capital improvement plans and all the things that we need to manage a utility, and you know, just having accurate mapping helps a lot day to day. And on that, I think we have a vehicle purchase coming up on the next council meeting for our mechanic vehicle, but it's our only vehicle purchase for the year. We got everything else in the budget taken care of already. Our hydro work on Marathon Hydro, we got the plant just about ready to go. The snow did come in. We'll have to kind of watch how the avalanche danger is on the side of the mountain, but our community partners, one of them was JAG, and so they rebuilt the intake manifold up for the Weir for half the price of buying a new one from the manufacturer. So we've had great community partnerships on that one from Catalyst Marine, JAG Marine, and then MECO. And so if you've been up the Jeep Trail lately, you probably noticed that it's a brand new trail pretty much. We'll have to do a little tuning up on it this spring, but we're hoping by latest June having the plant up and running again, basically just waiting on that intake manifold to get installed. But yep, crews are doing great. You'll probably also notice that there's 130 new LED lights along 3rd Avenue. So the return on investment on just changing those over to LEDs is 5 months from the high pressure sodium. So that was, the crew did a great job. I think they look good. A few people said they're a little dim. And so if the community wants, we have them set on the lowest setting. So we can always crank them up if everyone wants brighter lights, but we'll kind of, you know, figure out where to go from there. But anyway, we're not here to talk about this tonight, so I guess I'll pass it back to Brian.
Thanks, Taylor. The one thing I was, a brief update on the Clean Ports project. We do have the RFP went out for the ship to shore power facilities, I think on Monday. And so we'll expect to get bids back on that within the next 45 days. We're in preliminary design on the portion that runs from Fort Raymond, the battery energy storage system and the substation up there. We aren't certain whether we're going to go underground or overhead at this point in time from the station down to the shore power area. And we have a preliminary estimate, and we're kind of working through the details on that right now to make sure it fits within the budget, and to make sure that the battery energy storage system is in there. And as Taylor alluded to, that will significantly improve power quality in Seward during disturbances, like where trees get into lines or the line to Dave's Creek trips. The system down here will just be a lot more rigid and be able to withstand those. So if you're in a commercial situation, you'll see less power fluctuations during this period of time. But the primary focus of that battery when the ships are in port is to allow us to integrate the load of these big cruise ships into the electrical grid seamlessly without swinging the voltage and currents around. And just kind of a tie-in, one of the important things is that the 3 projects that Taylor mentioned, Spring Creek, Lawing, and Nash Road Phase 2, that conversion has to be completed before we can turn up the battery energy storage system and the Clean Power Project. And the Clean Power Project, for those of you who aren't aware, we had a $45 million grant from the EPA that we're using to fund that. And there was a 10% match, which is being put up by the Seward company. And so, but all of that work has to be online by 12/31/28. And so we have to get the Spring Creek, Lawing, and Nash Road finished so that we can then energize and turn up the battery energy storage system. That aside, the reason we're here tonight, Mark Begich is our speaker. As I mentioned, he's the president and CEO of Northern Compass Group. Mark has a long history in municipal governance. Believe it or not, at age 26, while serving on the Anchorage Assembly, he worked on governance options for the Anchorage Telephone Utility, examining continued municipal ownership, sale, and independent authority and cooperative models. The work contributed to decisions made in the early 1990s regarding ATU structure and eventual sale, and provides relevant historical context for the discussions we're having about the electric department here. Mark later served 10 years on the Anchorage Assembly and was the mayor of Anchorage from 2003 to 2007. It represented Alaska in the United States Senate from 2009 to 2014. Across these roles, he's worked in telecommunications, infrastructure, transportation, labor and workforce development, housing, economic development, and public sector governance. In the private sector, Mark has more than 40 years of business experience as an entrepreneur and CEO. His work includes mergers and acquisitions of public utilities and privately held companies, corporate restructuring, business turnarounds, capital raising, joint ventures, and equity investing. He currently leads Northern Compass Group and owns and operates resort and hot springs properties in Nevada, New Mexico, and Wyoming. He also serves on the executive board of the Anchorage Downtown Partnership. Most recently, Mark was lead on the concept and redevelopment of the Wild Birch Hotel, the old former Aviator Hotel, which opened in downtown Anchorage in 2025 on the site of the deteriorated property. The 252-room hotel is Anchorage's first lifestyle boutique hotel in 20 years and Alaska's first joint ventured by the Hyatt Hotel Group, serving as both a visitor base camp and community gathering space and as part of the revitalization of the Anchorage downtown area. Today, Mark will share the lessons he's learned in public leadership and governance, specifically related to historical municipal decisions and implications around utilities. With that, please welcome Mark Begich.
Hold down the button.
There we go. Thank you very much. And every event I've ever gone to in all my years, everyone sits in the back and never in the front. So I will, hopefully you'll catch everything. I appreciate it. Taylor, I have to tell you, how many LED lights did you say, 13? 130. 130? So, you already dated me on how old I am, so thank you very much for that. But we did a project in Anchorage we had 8,000 lights. The cost benefit was unbelievable. And your point that you can pay these off in 5 months is incredible what this technology does. And I remember when I brought this project forward, because half the roads in Anchorage are state-owned, but the city manages the streetlights. Another half are Anchorage-owned, and the city manages those. And when we went to DOT, no disrespect to DOT, let me start with that. We had to explain why we were doing this. They said, well, it's not in the design manual. I said, well, who writes the design manual? We do. Great, change it. And they said, well, I don't get it. So we actually created a LED light conference, which we held in the bottom floor. Remember this, Shauna? Shauna worked for me back then. In the bottom floor of the Captain Cook's, we invited some specialists in from around the country, and we talked about new lighting standards, and DOT was invited, and it was like a little conference. Well, my real goal was change your design manual. So at the end of the day, the DOT guys come and say, hey, this sounds really interesting. We should change your design manual. Yes! And then result was the city saved a lot of money on lighting. If you can imagine what you're saving on 130, and we had 8,000 of these lights. And the most interesting part was, when I was mayor, we owned an electrical company. And the last thing you want to do in an electrical company is reduce your consumption, because you're making money on the lights. So it was a conflict, really, of what we were trying to do here. So I tell you that because anything with utilities is not as simple like, oh, you flip the lights on, the lights go on. There's a lot more behind it. I want to start first with the telephone company. I was actually telling this story. I was on the Anchorage Assembly, as mentioned, 26 years old, and within a couple of years, the concept of privatizing was the concept of the telephone company. And you have to take yourself back to those days. The city received a license to do a thing called, before I got on the Assembly, not far before I got on the Assembly, to do two things. One, put some things in the ground called cable and have another channel than ABC, NBC, and CBS. People were like, and what did the city do? This was in the 80s. They said, well, no one's gonna do that. We don't need that franchise. Then rejected it, got rid of it. And I'm like, we look back now, that's the only thing that's really driving our technology today. Telephone was a thing called cell phones. No one really knew what they were. The city had a thing called MacTel. and it was their cellular company. And I will never forget this. I was at that point now, a couple years in, we're in a meeting, and a couple of members of the city council assembly said, you know, who's really gonna do that? You know, everyone has this copper line phone in their house. Who's gonna be on a phone all the time? And I remember, I was the youngest person there, so I'm like a little bit technology nerd to a certain extent. And I said, well, I think it's pretty cool. It's like Star Trek comes to your house. What, are you kidding me? And we should just get rid of that MacTel thing. Now we hung on to it. And in the process of deciding, that's what started to trigger me to say, do we know as a city government how to run a telephone company in an evolving technology? Our biggest profit margin in the telephone company when the city had it was, can anyone guess? What unit of business was the most profitable for us? What's that? Phone book. The yellow pages. If I asked my son, do you know what a yellow page is? He'd look at me like I'm a lunatic. It was an enormous moneymaker for the city. Of course, today they don't exist. The cellular business was moving at a very rapid pace. And so Mayor Fink, Tom Fink got elected mayor. I was on the assembly. He wanted to privatize it. Some of us said, hey, wait, slow down. You know, let's think about this. Very controversial. What we all instinctively knew, based on our own experiences, I mean, we'd spend meetings at the assembly meeting listening to the company, the telephone company coming up and asking us to approve a bid for technology that no one understood what the hell they were talking about, but we said, oh, okay, sure, whatever, you know. And then we'd have to deal with we had, at one point, 900 employees at the telephone company. It was massive. So we had to deal with all that labor issue, all these things. And it became apparent to us that we got to run this more efficiently. The technology is moving too fast. And so a group of us on the assembly, very bipartisan group, said, okay, let's think about this. So we ended up with we actually put three options on the ballot for the public. Because it was so controversial, no one could make a decision on what the right approach was. And the community was very split. We had, back in the day, for those that might remember, there was Alascon, big teleprovider. We used to charge, our telephone company used to charge, if you lived in Anchorage and you called Girdwood, which was still in the municipality of Anchorage, 25 cents a minute. Same company, same jurisdiction, but you live in Girdwood, so you must be out of the city, which you really weren't. But we had to figure this out. So we had bids, went out to bid. I think our first round was about $400-some million for the utility. Then we had on the ballot an authority, which is like kind of one step away from agency run. It gave a little more independence. It had a board of directors that would be appointed. It would be managed in a different way on purchasing rules. The assembly would not, and the mayor would not appoint at the utility. The mayor could appoint, I think there was 15 executive levels. So the mayor could appoint them, or the new mayor comes in, fires them all, appoints another group. So it was very volatile. And then we had components where they could pay more than the regular pay scale of a municipal employee. And the reason we did that was because to get a CEO for a company like that, the city could never compete. We'd get somebody, but we wouldn't get the quality in the emerging technology. The assembly had a lot of controversy on that. So we couldn't get a decent pay scale, but we got a better one in the city. So we put that on the ballot at the same time. Then we had one more bid that came in. We had actually two, one never completed, but one other bid, which was an outside private group that wanted to buy it. And it was called Citizens Utility. And then the last one was the employee group. It was so large, they were thinking of an ESOP, an employee-owned business. And they decided not to put it forward because they had a challenge of thinking about how to raise capital, emerging technologies, how to keep the speed. And they thought they would have some problems because the group that was interested was the one that represented, obviously, in a union, most of the employees. So they thought that would not necessarily be healthy for them. So we ended up with three, went to the ballot, voters selected the authority. We ran that for a few years, and we did get really good professional board members. They didn't have to live in Anchorage either, because that was a restriction under our code that if you serve on the board of commission, you have to be from the area, be a resident, but you've got to get people from all around. I can't remember the gentleman's first name, but his last name was Hill. Very well versed in technology, incredibly well versed. After a couple of years, he came to us and said, "It's moving too fast. We'll never catch up to what's going on." And the capital, because you can only raise so much capital, and there needed to be injection. If you think about today with AI, you hear these huge numbers, billions being put into AI just to figure it out with very little return. And technology, and again, you got to take yourself back to them. I mean, Facebook didn't exist. All the streaming didn't exist. So the things were changing rapidly. And we also had this other challenge, frankly. We had the authority trying to do things, but then we had, in all due respect to my friend Ron Duncan with GCI, coming down to the assembly and making sure that the authority could not compete in certain areas. Why? Because they wanted to own that market. So we then collectively decided we got to sell it. We got to get it on the market and get out of this business, because we were spending so much time. We were losing our focus. You know, when I got elected, I didn't get elected to manage a telephone company. I got elected to fix roads and make sure schools got funding and all those things that make a quality of life for people. And then we put it on the market. Now what happened? We didn't get 400 plus million. We got just shy of 300. In less than 2-3 years. Value. What was the biggest value holder for us? MacTel. They saw the future of MacTel, which then later this whole company ended up over time becoming ACS. So it evolved into this company. It was a good lesson, but also told me a lot about the ability for an agency to kind of move in a city government. So when I became mayor, I did two things. One was I looked at all our utilities and converted them by ordinance into authorities, kind of move them in one more step. The next mayor came along, changed them all back. I said, well, that's not working out so well. But when I was in the private sector, I got a chance to work on a project, which was MLP, and trying to figure out what to do with MLP. I was the mayor during almost 6 years, and I ran municipal light and power. That's as a CEO. I had a CEO there, but I was in charge. And oh my God, it was like one thing after another would come to me. One good example, I mean, I can't remember if you worked for Begich at that time or not, I can't remember, but they were building a power plant. MLP, Municipal Light and Power, was building a power plant, and all I saw was overbuilding. I remember going to the think about this. I appointed the person who ran Municipal Light and Power. I go to him and say, hey, why don't we co-locate our generation, power generation, cut costs, be redundant, blah, blah. Absolutely not. We have a different plan. What's the different plan? We're going to be way over on the other side of town. And I said, well, that doesn't make any sense. Why don't we work together and then we don't overbuild power generation? No, that's not what we're going to do. And you remember this, I mean, it probably cost the ratepayers a couple $100 million. This dumb decision. And they'd already been in motion, and I thought, we got to change this. And during my time, we changed a few things to kind of manage it differently. But it really wasn't until after I was out of the mayor and the Senate, this opportunity came to me that I could help figure out municipal light and power and what they could do with it. The mayor, Berkowitz, at that time asked me to help, and Begich asked me to help, and I said, let's figure it out. It took 5 years, 4 years, almost like 4 or 5 years to go through the process. But Northern Commons Group, we put our resources to it. We had to do everything in our power to kind of get out there. It was really a merger between Municipal Light and Power and Begich. And why is that important from a municipal standpoint? Because we spent so much energy, literally, on an element of the city government that wasn't our main focus. City government, in my view, is make sure the roads are good, all these things that we do every day. And this was sucking the life out of us because we'd be in controversies or we'd be bonding for several $100 million and all these issues. And so Municipal Light and Power, I had a chance to do it. Now this had been tried 4 or 5 times before. And it was really because of 2 organizations that didn't like each other. But yet they're providing the most important thing to a city, which is power. And they were in conflict all the time. So we saw a moment to figure out how to merge these 2 together, create lower rates, more capacity, more innovation with the company. And at the end of the day today, I think it was a great move. The city value on that, I think it was about $1 billion after they did their debt, pay off everything else. A chunk of that money goes into a trust fund that helps to offset property taxes and be available for new programming for the city. But one thing we did, I will tell you, if you decide down the road, if you're a co-op or you keep it or you sell it, if you go into that latter mode, me, Charles Warforth and I on the Senate, we set up this trust fund back in the ATU days because we thought this would happen. When we sold that $270 million, a lot of money back then for the telephone utility, the city would just blow it. So we put it into a trust fund that's managed professionally like a permanent fund, and it produces money. Now it's up to $400 or $500 million or more because we've added municipal light and power money to it. It's actually a great long-term benefit. But all of them have benefits, and they also have things that, you know, like I said on the telephone utility, the benefit was we got money out of it by selling it. By the authority, when we did the authority not fully sold, the benefit was we got all the appointments, only one, it was down to 1 for political appointments. So we got all that politics out of it. So they do have some, there's positive and negative for everything you do. Co-op, selling, own it yourself. And I agree with what Brian said. I think business as usual in this business, electrical, is rapidly changing also. And if you're not thinking about the future 10 years out, you're in trouble. And again, we all can probably sit here and think about that. But the people who make the decisions, because I served on the Senate, I served as mayor, we usually are thinking short term. So the long game is hard because you got to think, you know, if we would have got rid of MacTel and kept the yellow pages, can you imagine the value of ATU when we got ready to sell it? It'd probably be 100 million, 150. We'd have lost 300 million on that deal. So it's a tough call when you're in this type of business. It's different than water and sewer to a certain extent. You know, the most advanced thing on water and sewer has been SCADA systems. But those things are different. Garbage disposal, different. But these kind of utilities, we're having this debate in the city with some folks about the port. You know, what do we do? Do we own it? Do we not own it? What's happening here? But when it comes to these type of utilities, the emerging technology will outpace most government thinking. There's just no 2 ways about it. And I was one of those, you know, I was a believer that ATU should stay as a publicly owned utility. I fought it the first time, and we were successful. The second time, I jumped into the next question of authority, because I was very cautious. I thought this is going to be destroyed. We'll lose our ability to be locally owned, locally operated, our employees, all those things. With Municipal Light and Power, that was a little different because it joined up with a co-op. So it had that process. It's very engaging, except as we were joking about co-ops, sometimes they don't turn out the vote. If we think our elections have low turnout, co-op, I think she has around 10, 11% turnout. So you got to really think about these things. And then you have to also think as individuals of a community, where do you want to spend your time? Because utilities can drive you into a lot of time loss because you're just going to spend a lot of time thinking of these things. Or do you do it in a way that you can spend your time and use the utility as an asset for economic growth or quality of life growth? I'll end there because you probably have some questions. I know some came in earlier, but I'll try to answer them. But I've been through those wars. The worst one was the telephone utility because you had GCI, Alaskan, IBW union, outside forces, inside forces. It was political turmoil, frankly. But I think Dundee City made the right decision.
Sure.
Thanks, Mark. And I think there were some questions that had come in and I wanted to walk through them. I think you've covered many of them. I think you covered like the practical challenge you saw when managing a city department, you know, speed of decision making. That was one of the questions we had. The relationship between an independent authority and a cooperative model as opposed to direct city ownership. I think you covered those pretty well. I guess one thing is, what new challenges do you think, like forming a cooperative or an authority, what new challenges will that bring to the community from your perspective? What, you know, we see what the benefits are. Maybe you get a leaner, meaner machine, but there's there are cons to that, and what you're thinking here. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, when we did the authority, the first challenge was crafting it in a way that created more independence, because everyone had their views what that means, how to define independent. Our goal was we had to work through a process of setting what we call principles. Okay, what's the goal? More independent, more professionally run, less politics. So as long as we kept answering that question, everything we were talking about, then we got to a good ordinance, good resolution, and then getting the voters to buy into it was important. It's like what you've done here. You said this is your third meeting, right? This is a really good process, because what you're doing here is you're engaging the public the way we did on authority, which this would have been a better approach to start, frankly, because we just put it on the ballot. That was our public engagement, which, you know, I'd go out to meetings and people say, I'd never heard about this before, and you know, I get tortured, and the ones that said, oh, I heard about this, why are we even here tonight? You know, so you get this extreme differences. So that was a challenge. Then making sure on the authority, it was all about accountability, because you still had to have some oversight. And how much did you reach in without managing the authority as an elected body? On the co-op, the biggest challenge I think there is, and I just kind of alluded to it, is once you do the co-op, people say, oh, someone will take care of that. Well, no, a co-op is you. So you have to participate. Otherwise, 10%, Begich example, I don't know how many cut, 90,000?
90, yeah.
Yes, that means 9,000 people, really half of them, 4,500, because all it takes is simple majority to pass certain things. 4,500 people decide what 90,000 people are receiving. So when you think of a co-op, you must participate. There's not like someone else will do it, especially in a smaller community, because you know everybody, everyone's doing all kinds, usually people wear 10 hats and doing all kinds of stuff here. In Anchorage, we have the ability to get people to participate in authority, but a co-op, you have to think about that. The other thing is, and I wouldn't say this is an issue anymore, because I think, and we talked about it briefly, and that is there's ability to raise capital. It doesn't matter if you're that's one of the things, what does your capital expenditure do? What do you got to improve on a facility? And doing that, you got to raise capital. And in the markets today, it's easier to raise capital than it used to be, because there's a lot more fluid cash, a lot more investors, different rate structures, but there's more of that. I would have said that was a challenge. Not sure it is as much anymore, because I think there's a lot more flexible money out there. The other is, in either one of those two, you must have a pay scale that attracts who you need to run this utility. It's a business, it's highly technical, and if you get the wrong people, you will pay the price. There's no two ways, especially in a smaller community, because you have, you know, in Anchorage, you kind of spread it, that cost over 300,000 people. You don't get to do that here. It's a smaller group. So you got to be really, you make one mistake that's expensive, it's not one that goes away overnight. And you can't carry it for a few years, you end up carrying it for a lot of years. So that's the part of either one of those. But with a co-op, you gotta commit. And that's hard for a lot of people today, because they're so busy doing so many other things. But that's a requirement. I mean, otherwise you have a few running it. And even the co-ops have challenged. The MEA and Begich used to go through these battles with the union, the non-union supporters, the union supporters. They'd have big campaigns fighting each other, because remember, co-op members get elected. And so that becomes, you know, a challenge.
Thanks. I guess the wrap-up question, if you had one piece of advice to offer communities considering utility governance changes, what would it be? What's the magic? The magic bullet.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a magic bullet. First is getting informed, and you're doing that. I think, especially in a smaller community, because it is such an important part of what you have or what you can do. I mean, what you talk about with the port here, power is critical for the port to operate and bring in customers, which means business to your community. And if you don't have that done right, then you're going to pay a price. So being informed about all the options is, I think, a huge benefit. The second and last thing I'd say on what's the one thing, even though you said one, I'm giving two. The other thing I'd say is you're going to hear extreme views on either side of this issue. Sort out the facts from what you have. If you don't get it, ask for it. I've been in too many meetings on these kinds of issues after the fact, so I didn't know that. And they said, did you go to meetings? Yeah. Then just ask the question. No, you know, in this format, it gives you the chance to do that. So asking questions and obviously being prepared to, whatever decision you make, you will be part of that.
Thanks a million. I feel like we should clap or something. Somebody should do that. I guess just kind of to follow on from Mark's last comment is, as far as questions, obviously come up and ask them tonight. We'll have a microphone. We're willing to answer any questions that we can, and if we can't answer them, we'll get back to you on it. But I also would encourage you to write your questions down and drop them by the electric department. Go to our website and keep an eye on what we're doing. Over the next several months, we'll be putting stuff together to help you make better decisions.
So you talked about selling a utility, and you talked about turning it into a co-op and the pros and cons. What about selling it to a co-op? Maybe you could expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, it's very similar to what we did, thank you for that. It's very similar to what we did with Municipal Light and Power and Begich, because Begich is a co-op. So having those two, there's advantages with co-ops when you partner with them, or they're the end result. They get different financing rates, they have different flexibility to a certain extent, and your members are participants, right, at the end of the day. So with Begich and Municipal Light and Power is kind of the best of both worlds. We get it out of the politics of, who's the mayor, who's on the assembly, who's the majority, all that stuff that was just causing all kinds of issues. And out of taking all the executives that were all appointed, which was also a problem. But then you merge it to a co-op, which in this case, that co-op purchased the utility. And they end up, it took 2 years, I think, of transition, if I remember this right. Either you doing that's going to take time to transition. Depending on who you do it with, you've had both the large co-ops and the small co-ops here, depending on who, and that's the likely people of those groups, who has the financial capacity, who has the capital, and then do they bring something of value to you? What I mean by that, just being a co-op is a value, but just merging with them is, what does it get you? Does it get you a rate structure that's better? Does it get you economy of scale? Does it get you some new technology they're doing that you want to play off of? I think you had Kodiak here, which is huge in wind energy. I mean, it's unbelievable what they're doing. So, you want to look at that as part of your decision, if that's one of the decisions. But frankly, I think, it took us 5 years to get there because it required public vote, co-op vote, a lot of internal work. We had to figure out the union issue because there's same union, two different scales and wages. We had to merge all that stuff together. And that took some work, to say the least. And then we had to go out to the public. And what we found, the public was actually asking us when we got to the vote, why did it take you so long? It was like, we've been trying this for 4 different times and you didn't want to do it. So it was kind of like, okay, we did this right. Because we gave them benefits, but we're very clear on what they were going to get. And that was, it was a great experience, and I think the city, Anchorage, is better off for it because we have a more unified system and we're not saying, oh, you're not in downtown, so therefore Begich can't come in, or you're in South Anchorage and Municipal Light Power can't come in. It was like, we had power line issues. It was just weird. It was, you could be on the same street and have 2 different sets of power lines. What was that? So Yeah, I think it was a very good experience, but there was a lot of due diligence. And we even had a business committee at the beginning that got together, got consultants, and said, is this the right thing to do? And like I said, at the end of the day, I was like shaking my head. And people come to me, why didn't you do this sooner? Because you're on it. That's why. So it was a very interesting kind of hybrid, you might say. Oh, okay.
Microphone, what year did you start, and what year was the transfer of authority to
Yeah, it was about mid-90s, but it was literally two and a half years later. It was very quick. For the AT telephone company, yeah, we were real. Oh, utility? I want to say that had to be 2015, 2016, I think. Is that right, Brian? Because it was just after I was coming out of the Senate. Yeah, I think it was 20, yeah.
Oh, yeah, it took 5 years, sorry.
Yeah, 2015 and
We closed in October of 2020.
Yeah, so it's very recent, yeah. And the dynamics were changing also in the electrical business because renewables were really, think about 2015 and then prior to that, people talked about renewables, but now they're accelerating everywhere, some of them, they're cheaper, they produce cheaper than they used to be. I shouldn't say cheaper than some gas, I will be frank about that, but there's new technologies that are coming, these micronuclear plants are very interesting in what they might do. There's tidal being studied right here, out in the inlet. All that is kind of out there. But yeah, very recent, and it was something. I mean, it wasn't, I wish it was a straight, smooth line, as all the engineers that I had to work with wanted, and it was like this. Because people also had, Let's Talk radio, there was a lot of just, oh, this is going to crush the city, or someone's really behind this that's not telling us, it's things like that. But we just kept telling people, here's the facts. Here's what it is. You make the call. And if you don't like it, off we go.
And we also spent about 1.5 years in front of the Regulatory Commission.
That's right.
After we got the sale consummated, we borrowed the money.
Yeah, that's right.
And so there was a long regulatory process.
Yeah. Because they were looking out for the consumer and making sure price points, because there's a lot of commitments made about rates.
Yeah, hi. My name is Bob Bartle. I'm actually on the city council. Well, first question I have is, do you guys ever have fun? I mean, you can seem like these kind of things take so much work of hammering out all these details.
This is fun.
That's the problem. Some of us think this
don't
is
know what to
fun.
say about that.
I actually find this topic super fascinating also. The first question, I have a few. One, can you define what an authority is? Because you use that term, I'm not sure.
Yeah, the best way to describe an authority is it's a professionally run organization that has very little politics in it, meaning you shift away from political appointments of the running of the agency. And second, it has flexible purchasing rules, payroll rules, meaning salaries, you can go higher, and you have bonding capacity that you can utilize both tax-free and non-taxable. That's the gist of it. But it's really about, you're going to run independent. We're not going to micromanage you. For example, I'm sure you get contracts from the utility that you got to approve, and some of you look at it and go, what is this part for? And they start explaining it, and you go, yeah, okay, that's enough. I'm in. So you get rid of all that, which the amount of time we freed up at the city assembly when I was on the assembly when we did ATU, it was a breath of fresh air. Because now we were focused on parks, roads, public safety, education.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. That helps. Just a little background. Of course, you know that we went up for a sale a couple of years ago, and that's failed closely. I think the public perception in Seward was that for years the utility had made money in the city. We're finding out now that it was probably only because we had so much deferred maintenance, and that we're really actually getting caught up with that now. Being on council, I completely agree with you that because we're on 3-year terms and it's rotating all the time, and some of the people, frankly, have no interest in it. It's technical and it's difficult to manage, and It's just not in their wheelhouse. So I really do agree with that idea that the council's not a good fit for managing a utility. And I like that idea of authority. So the other issue I have as a city council member is just looking at this going, we have these opportunities. We're really lucky to have Brian and Taylor. I think we're just phenomenally lucky to, I think we had a good manager. Kat really courted these guys, and it worked. It's been working really well. And hopefully we can keep Taylor, if not Brian, for a long time. But
I think they're negotiating with you right now.
Yeah. Well, maybe not Brian. I think Brian wants to have more fun.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure. But if we don't, because I do remember that in Cordova they had a long-term manager, someone that stayed there for years, and that was part of their success story. So we would have to keep Taylor a long time. Hopefully we meant to that.
Well, they're really like, don't respond, I'll negotiate for you.
Yeah, right. Actually, it's a negotiating tactic. But I guess what we're conflicted with is we have some potential here for some hydropower. We like our autonomy, and I'm personally nervous about the fact that Railbelt is in a situation of running out of fuel and is going to import their gas. And it's kind of nice to have our autonomy and maybe have this hydropower and stay neutral or I guess separate from them, and even maybe sell some power back in Anchorage. But that takes maybe a qualified authority, and we're a small town. We don't have that many people that have the interest or the technical ability to manage this. So can you just comment on that?
Yeah, and I will say this, that the authority component, you have that membership, I think we had 5 on that board, maybe 7. They have to be very good at what they do, because you have now entrusted them to run an asset of yours, the city's asset, and run it in a way that has a value. And what happens, you just said it, and this is very interesting. Publicly owned facilities, they'll always tell you they're doing the deferred maintenance, they're doing it. What I just heard Taylor say, which is great, that he's getting all these backlogs. But the word was backlog. Because what happens is they get pressure. Well, what are you returning to us? Meaning the government or the people. And when they say, well, nothing, we're providing power, and all you see is your rates go up, you're kind of like, I'm not sure this is in our interest. Now, going to an authority, it is a tough call to get the right people to serve on that board the right way, because the way we did it, we had designated seats. I think we had an engineer, a business person. We did put a union person on there because like 80% of our workforce was unionized over there. And I can't remember the other two. We might have had a citizen and one other. But they got to dedicate time. It's no different than a co-op board in a way, because you signed up, you run, you get on a co-op board, and they tell you the next thing they go, yeah, it's one meeting monthly. Oh, great, I'll run. Next thing you know, they have 3 subcommittees through the month. Then they have an employee committee. Then you have a training session. Then you have a conference. And before you know it, both groups, it doesn't matter if it's an authority or a co-op, you're very busy. So you got to be willing to spend the time. And that's what you asked what the biggest challenge of these are. That's it. And you have to be learned on it. You got to know this information. Because when you're sitting down and you're the board and you've hired hopefully a good executive, they're going to bring you things like a bond package that they're going to bring to buy whatever, to upgrade their equipment. And these are not usually, a few $100,000. When you're buying the equipment they will need for power generation, it's in the millions. So you got to be really aware of those things. But I'm always, I'm a very, like I said, when I got on the assemblyman, I didn't want not one of those utilities sold to anybody. But it didn't take me long to figure out, oh my God, what are we doing here? Because I'd be in those meetings, we had 11. And I remember the day we were debating in 1990 the purchase of one electric van. 2 nights, an hour and a half about on each night, to talk about one electric van. I'm thinking to myself, okay, I don't know about this electric stuff back then, you're kind of like, what? And I'm thinking, okay, I spent 3 hours, about 8 hours of evening meetings on one thing. It was $110,000. That's, the whole debate was on. And we had a $250 million budget. What was I doing, you know? So, again, I think it's, your point is a good one. Who you get on there is important, and how they're selected. In this case, it was still selected by the assembly and the mayor. Mayor appointed, assembly confirmed, but we had a higher threshold of kicking someone off. They couldn't just do it because they became a mayor. They had to get 8 of the 11 assembly members to kick anyone off that board. That was a very high threshold, and it protected quality people. Maybe they disagreed politically with the mayor that may have came in later, but we need the quality. So that's the, if you're gonna do it, authority, you're still gonna have someone has to appoint them. And if you do it, you've gotta make sure you have a high enough threshold of the city council who confirms those, that they just can't come in and be mayor and kick everyone off. Because you'll create the same instability you had as a public owned.
Thank you for coming down to talk to us about this.
Sure.
I have 2 quick questions. One is, could you touch bases on where money could come from if we were to purchase this as a co-op, and people inside and outside the city? And second of all, right now we're unregulated. If we were a co-op, would we be regulated?
Aren't you regulated down here?
No.
Yeah, there's a
So,
piece of, go ahead.
we are, you know, Seward is regulated from a reliability and a service territory perspective. We're not economically regulated, so
No.
we set our own rates. And going forward, we could continue to set our own rates. It requires, the statute allows co-ops to either be regulated or not regulated.
Right.
Most of the co-ops are in the rail belt, all the co-ops in the rail belt, not Seward, not Cordova, Cabo Valley, or Kodiak. They're unregulated. But the rail belt utilities are, the rail belt co-ops are, for them to unregulate, the bar is very high. So going into the process, if you were to form a co-op, you would want to, my recommendation is we're too small to be regulated. You know, the co-op board could regulate, should regulate it, because the cost of sitting in front of the regulatory commission is huge. I mean, you have a lot of attorneys and consultants on staff who are down there making your case to RAPA, the Regulatory Affairs and Public Advocacy Office.
Which you pay for too.
Which you pay
You
for
pay for it all. No,
You know,
you pay for the people opposing you.
yeah,
That's how it
they're on the
works.
other side of the table picking you apart, and you pay their salaries. It's hard to, yeah. So just, that's the one thing I would say about that. Yeah. And from a financing perspective, as a co-op, you have 3 primary sources available. The RUS, which is Rural Utility Services, it's federal. They have very low interest rates, but fairly complex rules. There's also the CoBank, which is a cooperative bank. They have very favorable rates and very few rules. And CFC, which is the Cooperative Finance Corporation. And those are both national organizations that fund electric cooperatives. So if you were to go the co-op route, and we've had, just to test the waters, we had some preliminary discussions with CFC as well as CoBank. You know, and they do things like what we're doing right here. They haven't given us any, we haven't said we're going that way, we haven't said we're going that way, we haven't given them any information financially, but they have in the past funded things like this. So we do know that we're not foreclosed there.
Yeah. And you can also tap in the private market. It's just
Absolutely.
more expensive.
You can go out, you know, I mean, absolutely. I mean, when we did the $885 million for ML&P, we went to the private market, and actually they beat the 30-year treasury by
It was unbelievable.
50 basis points. I mean, you know, there's money out there. This is a very smaller deals, would be a much smaller deal, so I'm not sure how that would all shake out.
Yeah.
Right. And I bet you if Seward were to become co-op, there would be more than 10% show up for voting. Electric is a big subject here. And don't let the low turn out tonight discourage you.
No. I'm just, here's what I do know. I don't know what your municipal election turnouts are like. Someone might know that number, I don't know. But
35%.
there we go, 35%. So that will be at best your peak. I'm just telling you, based on
Yeah,
our experience
yeah, I agree,
of small communities and large communities, why I'm saying, why I want that on the table is because then you have to think about, you got to get more involved. People, it's just, it's not a negative in a sense for the people, it's just everyone's so busy, right? Everyone's working or has to work, or you got all kinds of stuff going on, or you got kids to take care of. It's just, and before you know it, it doesn't matter if it's an authority or a co-op, you got a lot of responsibility. But there are people who will want to do that. And you just want, as a community, to think about that as you get down that path. I think the question back here from this gentleman was a good one. Like, okay, you may have a lot of people interested, but you got to make sure they have the ability and the qualifications you need to take the utility where it needs to go, whatever that is. And as a community, you'll decide that, right? You might say, we just want to be a basic utility with 30% renewable or something. But you may also say, in 10 years, we want to be 90% renewable, like Kodiak, right? And you may, and then how long, and it's amazing in those states because literally you'll get these deeds that are old style, handwritten, all the way back from time beginning. And it's wild to understand, because sometimes it was used for agriculture, some was for cattle, some it was just used for household. But in the state, if someone asked me, would water rights be an issue and protecting rights, that's probably the least of the worry I would have, because the state will go through a process with whoever owns it to make sure you have, if you claim you can use this for hydro and you need this much, they will work with you to get that claim resolved.
But if it's another competing utility, they can just come in and build.
Well, if you already had the water rights and already figured out, they just assume those rights for the state approval, I'm assuming, yeah.
Okay, I'll
Yeah.
Yeah, because we have like service rights, pool rights, and aquifer rights, depending upon which aquifer, so I don't know.
Right.
what it is.
Just a follow-up question to that. Two or three of the most promising hydro facility projects in the area are kind of tied up right now by other utilities. Is there some way to move those forward in the interests, if the community decided, or the community's utility decided that it was in the interest of the community? Is there some way they can partner, or maybe somehow get those projects, get a hold of those projects? Because
I would say that irrespective of the status of any of those projects right now, there's always an option to sit down and talk to folks and find out where we have common ground and where we can actually make something happen. So yes, I mean, I don't see that any of them are foreclosed. All of them are different, have different, whether you're on Forest Service land and need FERC permits, or whether you're on city land and the city can approve it, or whether the FERC license is owned by someone else and maybe they want to sell it, or maybe they don't, and we don't have any deal with them. So there's just a lot of those, but those are all, they're things that, that are out there, and we're, as I've said a few times, we are putting together a strategic generation plan that will kind of outline our alternatives in that world.
And strategies how to do it.
Yeah.
do those projects expire at some point, or? I know there's a lot of work that's been put into some of them.
What I know, I don't know about DEC water rights. I do know that, FERC preliminary permits have a 5-year life. I believe FERC, full-on FERC licenses for hydroelectric projects have a 10-year life if the project isn't started. Obviously, if the project gets constructed, they have a 50-year life. I don't know if that's obvious, but they have a 50-year life and they have to be relicensed. So there are lives, and it isn't like you can lock up the world and just sit on it forever. So that's all been.
Use it or lose it.
Yeah, we're nested. Yeah. That ground has been well traveled. So I hate to do this, but we've run over by 7 minutes, and I want to value everybody's time. And I think Bruce may have one.
Well, I got one more. I hope this is not too hardball, but I would like to understand where the economics of this process, where it's coming from. I don't remember the city passing a resolution that dedicated a certain amount of money towards this process, including hiring Mark's firm, etc. So could you let me know who is paying for this and how?
I can do that. Yep. You might have to submit information. Just saying that's how we do it. Try to be fair to everybody. So just to wrap up, I want to thank Mark. Thanks a million for coming down here. A long drive, but hey, it's almost summer down here, so you gotta love that.
Someone was coming down this weekend, seriously, what's the weather like? And at one point it wasn't raining. When I got here, into the parking lot, I tell you about it's raining, but it's good. It's spring.
There are more opportunities ahead for Seward residents to ask questions in a lot of forums. We certainly will take questions in writing if you have them. We want you to learn about utility options and models, and so if you have questions about them, bring them to us. Like I said, I haven't worked out the details. I have a concept, and usually when I have a concept, my buddy Taylor here gets to figure out how we're going to do the details. But I have a concept of some sort of an apples-to-apples comparison of these various alternatives. So that hopefully will be, we'll have it for our next town hall meeting. There will be additional surveys. I got some great feedback on the survey tonight, and we'll certainly incorporate that. And please, participate in the surveys. If you get asked to participate in the focus groups, please participate. The website, we have the website up, and so you'll see updates there on where we're going. And just to reiterate, I think I've said it once or twice tonight, we have not made any decisions. This is an open and transparent, collaborative learning process for everybody in the community. And all you're going to get out of it is what you put into it. So get involved, because we're trying to move you to a place where you can make a decision, and I can go out in my van and go skiing and mountain biking and things that are on my future list. Yeah, so that's it. I wanted to just remind folks that this is being live streamed and recorded, and so it's available if someone wants to go back and watch it, or if someone didn't get a chance to be here tonight, they can go back and watch it. And with that, I think we've wrapped it up. Thanks a million.
Thank you.